To me, browsers are like windows to a new dimension, unless they suddenly crash and you lose all your open tabs. To be fair, browsers improved a lot over the past 30 years. I had access to internet pretty early in my life and had the opportunity to see the tech evolve. And this was the first browser I used, the famous Internet Explorer 4. There was also the competitor, Netscape 3 Gold. And look at the memory requirements of this. It took a whole 8 megabytes of memory. You may laugh, but computers back then usually had between 8 and 32 megabytes of RAM. And the feeling of hearing the sound of the dial-up connection.
Now here's a little background. When we installed internet access on our computer, I got the whole family involved.
It's true. Everybody had their own tasks to do.
It was a lot of work, but it was really worth it.
Now that I've gotten on the internet, I'd rather be on my computer than doing just about anything.
You're going surfing on the internet.
I'd like to add a word about safety, though. You have to remember the internet is not a regulated environment, so the quality and accuracy of various informational offerings can differ quite a bit. There may even be a concern if your children should access some of them. So, go online with them on the net. Or set your Microsoft Internet Explorer browser to only accept G-rated sites.
Can you believe what's possible these days? Conversations through your computer, worlds of information one click away. All the things you find only on the world's most popular internet online service, now more affordable than ever. It's like living in the future. The future, now available on America.
Let me pull you out of the nostalgia. And before we get to start working on the web app, I think it's important to understand a little bit more about how a browser works in a basic level at least, and also to see a little bit of the architecture of what we are planning ahead. Back then, software was made to be as efficient as possible because the hardware was pretty limited, as you could see. But browsers were sort of always bad at being efficient. Browsers were initially designed to interpret relatively simple text files like this one and turn these into colorful web pages. And over time, the demand for more functionality and newer media types required new standards to be added on top of what was already working, so they had to coexist. From an architectural perspective, I was going to say a browser is like a mosaic window, but I think it became something more like a favela, to be honest. And there is a big complaint about the state of web development and all the software that composes this ecosystem. And for someone that is just getting to know development, software development in general, it can be quite frustrating to develop a complete web application because there are so many smaller pieces of knowledge needed that someone could get easily lost on the process. If you want to have an idea of all the different standards that a browser has to implement, you can check out two international organizations that take care of all the core standards for the internet. One is IETF and the other is W3C. IETF usually takes care of the lower level or the networking part of the internet standards. And W3C usually takes care of the higher level standards for the web, technologies that a browser has to specifically support, whereas IETF usually has all the transport protocols that usually an operating system implements and the browser just uses that. But if you take a look here at this webpage, rfceditor.org, you can find even the specification for the HTTP protocol itself. If you are ever wondering how files are retrieved by the browser, here you find these technical documents. But you have to be patient while reading because these are very deep. And here we have the W3C standards that are usually split on different technology avenues that you can go, from web design and applications to features of the device, and so on. So these are some things that I think that it's nice to take a look, but you don't have to dwell too much because most of these specs are already implemented. It's just ready for you to use. Hey, wake up! We are not finished with this video yet. The absolute basic thing to know is that once you type the URL, this human-friendly address will be translated into a numerical address called the IP address. The browser then establishes a network connection to the server on that address using the HTTP protocol. Usually, the first file to be requested is the index.html file. Every server has multiple services. A service is the software responsible for listening to requests and providing a reply. Here, the HTTP service answers the request for the index file, which in turn is temporarily stored by the browser to start interpreting the information. These are the three most common file types. The HTML file is a markup file, which is a web page representation using a hierarchical data structure. A CSS file contains the styles, which are attributes for the visual representation of each element. JS files are basically scripts or code that is programmed using JavaScript language. They usually dictate the dynamic behavior of a web page. There are also other media files such as fonts, images, and videos. As soon as the browser has the necessary files, it will start interpreting the HTML and CSS to build the DOM.
How did things ever get so far? I don't know.
No, not you, Don. The DOM stands for Document Object Model. This is basically an in-memory representation of everything specified in the files that were just retrieved. Once this data structure is ready, the fun begins with code execution. All previous static elements can now be modified by our code, affecting the visual representation of our web page. The user can then begin the quest for finding bugs, non-intentional features. You will also hear the words back-end and front-end. A back-end is related to all the software that is in the server. A front-end, in this case, is the web page or application running in the browser. For the purposes of this project, our server back-end will be mostly composed of Node.js, which is a JavaScript execution environment, and a Mongo database. They work pretty well together without any extra fluff, and we simplify development by using only one programming language. With this, you are now officially welcomed to the wonderful world of web development. I promise this is the last time I'm going to do this, but as I was editing, I almost forgot about what is perhaps the best thing that improved in browsers over the past 10 years or so, I would say, which is related to the web development tools. I believe this is a built-in feature present in most browsers available today. Yeah, so this is a website I created 242 days ago and never finished. But the important thing here is how the web dev tools work. Here in Google Chrome, you can press Ctrl-Shift-I and it will open this right panel here with all the information that is currently being used in the document object model. You can, for instance, click on any part of your web page with the right button of your mouse and click on Inspect, and we will highlight the HTML element that corresponds to that visual element you just clicked. This is pretty cool because you can basically tweak all the different parameters of every element of your web page, and once you are satisfied with whatever you change, then you can do that in your code. Here you find three panels. The first panel is the HTML. The second panel here in the middle is the CSS part or the style part of your web page. And the third one is where usually the feedback from your code gets displayed, and you can also type code here in JavaScript to modify any elements. So that's it. That was the thing that I think that improved the best over the past 10 years in web browsers. If you wish to know a little bit more about web development or you are interested in this project, please consider subscribing. See you next time.